loveliest listener of the Ton. If you have never been hated by people who have never met you, you have never been truly introduced to London. They hated Miss Seraphina Blythe on principle. Not because she had done anything wicked, but because 5 years ago, when the most eligible gentleman in England died in a locked music room, society required a woman to blame. And Seraphina, quiet, clever, and inconveniently present, had been the easiest shape to turn into a villain. So the Ton did what it always did. It made a story. A tragic, delicious story about a girl with pretty hands and dangerous ambition who must have wanted something badly enough to kill for it. The truth was far less theatrical. The truth was that Seraphina had been 17, standing outside the music room with a violin case in her hand, and she had heard a body fall behind the door. And then the door had opened, and she had seen Lord Julian Merrow, pale as wax, collapsed at the pianoforte. And beside him, on the polished black lid, was a scrap of paper, torn from a letter, smeared with blood. Seraphina grabbed it before anyone else could, because she'd recognized the handwriting instantly. Her mother's. And that single instinct, quick, desperate, loving, had been the moment her life ended. Because when the physicians declared Julian dead, and the magistrate arrived, and the Ton began to gather like carrion birds, Seraphina realized the most terrifying thing. That blood-stained scrap meant her mother had been in the room, or had been meant to be. And London did not forgive women who were near sin. London preferred women who were ornamental. Seraphina had never been ornamental, so she vanished before they could destroy her completely. She spent 5 years in Bath, living under the smallest name possible, Miss Sarah Bell, teaching music to girls who cried over scales, and dreaming of a life that didn't require permission. It almost worked. She almost became no one. Until the letter arrived in winter, cream paper, black seal, and a crest she remembered too well. A stag over crossed swords, the House of Ashcombe. The hand inside her envelope was unfamiliar, male, clean, disciplined. Miss Blythe, you do not know me, but I have your name in my possession, and I suspect you have a secret that belongs to mine. Return to London. I will meet you at St. James's Park on Thursday, noon. If you do not come, I will assume guilt is why you hide. Lord Rafe Ashcombe. Seraphina stared at the signature until her lungs hurt. Ashcombe. The family Julian Merrow was due to marry into, the family that gained everything when Julian died, the family London said had suffered so nobly. Her stomach turned, because the letter was a trap, and worse, something in her wanted to spring it. Not because she was brave, because she was tired of being hunted by a story she never wrote. So Seraphina returned to London. London greeted her the way it greeted all returning ghosts, with eager cruelty. The first whisper came before she even stepped from her carriage. Blythe, isn't that the girl from the Merrow death? Lord, yes, poor Julian. They said she had blood on her gloves. No, that was the other one. Who cares? She looks guilty. Seraphina walked through it all with her chin lifted. Not because she felt strong, because she knew what would happen if she looked weak. London didn't comfort weakness, it collected it. St. James's Park was gray with winter. The lake looked like cold metal. The trees were stripped bare like a threat. At precisely noon, a man approached along the path with a sort of controlled stride that suggested he had never once been forced to apologize. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed simply but expensively, his gloves immaculate, his eyes the color of storm water. And when he stopped in front of Seraphina, he did not smile. He looked at her like a man evaluating a weapon. "Miss Blythe," Seraphina inclined her head, "Lord Ashcombe." His gaze flicked briefly to her hands, her posture, her face. "You were very difficult to find," he said. Seraphina's voice remained calm. That was the point. Something, interest, moved behind his eyes. "Good," he said softly. "Then you understand why I wrote." Seraphina's heart did not flutter. It clenched. "Why did you?" she asked. Lord Rafe Ashcombe reached into his coat and withdrew a folded object. Not a letter, a music sheet. Old, yellowed, and at the top in elegant script, Julian Merrow's Requiem, dedicated to S.B. Seraphina's blood went cold. He watched her reaction with clinical precision. "You recognize it," he said. Seraphina swallowed. "That's impossible. It was found in my mother's desk 2 weeks ago, hidden beneath the false bottom." Seraphina's throat tightened. "Your mother was Julian's intended," she whispered. Rafe's gaze sharpened. "Yes," he said, "and Julian died in our house." Seraphina forced herself to breathe. "What do you want?" she asked. Rafe stepped closer, voice low enough to feel dangerous. "I want the truth," he said, "because someone is trying to kill my mother, slowly, politely, and with perfect manners." Seraphina went still. "What do you mean?" Rafe's jaw tightened. "She has been poisoned," he said, as if stating a fact that made him sick. "In small doses, enough to weaken, not enough to prove." Seraphina's stomach dropped. "And you think I'm involved?" she asked, her voice tightening. Rafe's gaze held hers. "I think," he said quietly, "you were blamed for a death you didn't cause." Seraphina blinked. It felt like stepping on ice that should have cracked. "Why would you think that?" she whispered. Rafe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said the sentence that changed the ground under her feet. "Because the night Julian died, I was the one who locked the music room." Seraphina's vision narrowed. "What?" Rafe's voice stayed steady, but his eyes darkened with something like self-disgust. "I was 19, he said. "I found Julian with a letter in his hand. He was shaking. He told me he was going to ruin my mother." Seraphina's lips parted. "Ruin her?" Rafe's gaze flicked away, then back. "He said she'd be disgraced by morning," Rafe said quietly. "He said she'd never recover," and he smiled like it pleased him. Seraphina felt heat rise in her chest. Julian Merrow, the Ton's darling, wasn't supposed to have sharp edges. But Seraphina remembered his charm. Charm often hid teeth. Rafe continued, voice lower now. "I locked the door because I wanted 5 minutes, he said. 5 minutes to convince him to stop." Seraphina's heart pounded. "And then he died," she whispered. Rafe held her gaze. "And then he died," he confirmed. "And when the door opened, you were there." Seraphina's fingers went numb. "So London blamed me," she said, voice tight, "because you couldn't admit—" "Because my mother would have been destroyed," Rafe said, blunt and bitter, "and because I thought you would disappear." Seraphina's breath caught. "You thought I would sacrifice myself." Rafe's silence was the answer. Seraphina stared at him, rage and disbelief colliding so hard she almost laughed. "You're asking for my help now," she said softly, "after you let the Ton carve me into a monster." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said, "because I deserve your hatred, and because you're the only one who understands what it means to be ruined by a lie." Seraphina's throat burned. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to cry. She wanted to do something unladylike enough to feel real. Instead, she said the coldest truth she had. "I will help your mother," she said, "not for you, because no woman deserves to be quietly murdered in a drawing room." Rafe's eyes flickered. Relief, then something worse. Hope. "And when we're done," Seraphina added softly, "you will give me my name back." Rafe nodded once. "You'll have more than that." Seraphina's voice didn't soften. "We'll see." Ashcombe House was beautiful in the way a sword was beautiful, polished, lethal, and designed for power. Lady Ashcombe was not the terrifying Duchess Seraphina had imagined. She was pale, elegant, sitting too still in a chair by the window, as if movement cost too much. Her eyes, however, were sharp as needles. When Seraphina was announced, Lady Ashcombe's gaze fixed on her like a recognition. "Miss Blythe," Lady Ashcombe said softly. Seraphina curtsied. "My lady?" Lady Ashcombe studied her face. Then she did the last thing Seraphina expected. She smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, like a woman seeing a ghost she thought she'd buried. "So," Lady Ashcombe murmured, "they sent you back to me at last." Seraphina went cold. "What do you mean?" she asked. Lady Ashcombe's fingers tightened on her teacup. "I begged Julian to leave you out of it," she said quietly, "but he always did enjoy making women pay for men's mistakes." Rafe's posture stiffened. Seraphina's stomach twisted. "You knew," Seraphina whispered. "You knew I was blamed." Lady Ashcombe's eyes flickered. Guilt, anger, calculation. "I knew, and I was powerless to stop it." Seraphina laughed once sharp. "Powerless?" she repeated. "In a house like this?" Lady Ashcombe's gaze went hard. "You think wealth is power?" she said softly. "Wealth is only a cage with better upholstery." Seraphina's chest tightened. Lady Ashcombe leaned forward, voice dropping. "Tell me," she said, "did you take the scrap of paper from the pianoforte that night?" Seraphina's blood went ice cold. "Yes," she whispered, "I did." Rafe's head snapped toward her. "You never told anyone," Lady Ashcombe said softly. Seraphina's voice trembled with old pain. "It was my mother's handwriting," she said. I thought she'd be accused." Lady Ashcombe's eyes softened just slightly. "And she would have been," she said. Silence. Then Lady Ashcombe said carefully, "Your mother wrote that note to save you." Seraphina's breath caught. "What?" Lady Ashcombe's voice stayed low. "She knew Julian planned to force you into a situation you could not escape," she said. "She asked me for help. That note was an arrangement, an escape." Seraphina's heart hammered. "Then why was it bloody?" she whispered. Lady Ashcombe's gaze slid toward Rafe, and something unspoken passed between them. Seraphina saw it, a private agreement, a buried truth. "Because," Lady Ashcombe said softly, "that was the night someone tried to kill me for the first time." That was when Seraphina understood. Julian's death had not been the beginning. It had been a cover. Someone had used the chaos to hide a quieter crime, an attempted murder in a room full of music and witnesses. And Seraphina, standing outside the door with a violin case, had been the perfect scapegoat. Her rage shifted. It became sharper, more precise.
Rafe watched her like a man realizing she was more dangerous than he expected. "What do you remember?" Seraphina asked. Lady Ashcombe's fingers tightened. "I remember Julian shouting," she said. "I remember the door locking." Rafe flinched. "I remember the taste of almonds," Lady Ashcombe said, continuing, voice steady. "And I remember thinking, how clever, how polite, poison in a genteel house." Seraphina swallowed hard. "And now it's happening again," she whispered. Lady Ashcombe nodded once. "It is," she said, "and I believe the person doing it is in my own family." The room went still. Rafe's voice was tight. "Who?" Lady Ashcombe looked directly at Seraphina. "That," she said softly, "is why you're here." That night, Seraphina wandered the long corridors of Ashcombe House, unable to sleep. Her old shame was being rewritten into something else. Not innocence, not redemption, purpose. And purpose was terrifying. She found herself in the music room where Julian Merrow had died. The pianoforte sat in the corner like a memory, and on the stand, waiting like a dare, was Julian's requiem, dedicated to S.B. Seraphina's fingers touched the first note. Then a voice spoke from the doorway. "You still play?" Rafe stood there, coat removed, sleeves rolled to his forearms. Without the armor of society, he looked younger, more human, more dangerous. Seraphina didn't turn. "I teach," she said softly. "Playing is for people who can afford to feel." Rafe crossed the room, slow. "You can afford it," he murmured. "You just refuse." Seraphina's throat tightened. "I refused because London wanted me ruined, and you let it." Rafe's voice went rough. "I did, and I have hated myself for it every day since." Seraphina turned then, eyes bright. "You don't get absolution because you regret," she said quietly. Rafe nodded. "I know," he murmured. "That's why I'm not asking for absolution." He stepped closer. "Then why are you here?" Seraphina demanded. Rafe's gaze flicked to her mouth, then back to her eyes like a man punishing himself for wanting. "Because," he said softly, "every time you look at me, you look like you're deciding whether I deserve to live." Seraphina's breath caught. "And what have you decided?" he asked. Seraphina's voice dropped. "I decided," she said, "that I won't let you distract me from what I came here to do." Rafe's mouth twitched. "That sounded like a warning," he murmured. "It is." Rafe leaned in, close enough for Seraphina to feel the heat of him. "Then give me another," he said. Seraphina's pulse jumped, furious at her own body, so she gave him the only warning she could trust, the truth. "I cannot love a man who benefits from my ruin," she whispered. Rafe's eyes darkened. "Then don't love me yet," he murmured. "Let me earn something first." Seraphina's chest ached, and to her horror, she realized he meant it. That was the most dangerous kind of man, the kind who would wait. The next day brought the first public blow, a ball at Ashcombe House, hosted by the Duchess herself, because Lady Ashcombe believed in confronting poison with chandeliers. The Ton arrived hungry. They always arrived hungry. Seraphina walked into the ballroom on Rafe's arm, and the room made the sound it always made when a scandal becomes visible, a collective inhale. Whispers hissed like steam. "That's her, the Blythe girl, the one from Julian's death. Why is she here? Lord Ashcombe is mad." Then, like a blade sliding from silk, another voice appeared behind her, soft, familiar, lethal. "Cecily." No, not Cecily. Seraphina's stomach dropped. because only one person in England said her name like that, her sister. Seraphina turned slowly and saw Arabella Blythe, alive, glittering, and wearing a new surname like a weapon. Lady Arabella Vane, married, respected, and smiling as though nothing had ever happened. Rafe's grip tightened slightly. He hadn't known. Seraphina's voice was steady only because her anger kept it upright. "You're late," Seraphina said. Arabella's smile widened. "I've always been the interesting one," she purred. "You always were the dutiful one." Seraphina felt the room lean in, because London adored sisters. Sisters meant comparison. Sisters meant blood. Sisters meant a private war fought in public. Arabella's gaze flicked to Rafe. "Oh," she murmured, sweet as poison. "A new protector. How charming." Seraphina's eyes narrowed. "You came for something," she said softly. Arabella's smile didn't change. "Of course I did," she replied. "I came to keep you quiet." And then the first twist struck. Arabella leaned in, close enough for Seraphina to smell expensive perfume. "Julian didn't die because of you," she whispered. "He died because of me." Seraphina went still. Her blood turned to ice. Arabella's eyes glittered. "I slipped into the music room before you arrived," she murmured. "I heard him threatening Lady Ashcombe. I saw the poison he meant for her." Seraphina's voice came out strangled. "You poisoned him." Arabella smiled. "No," she whispered. "I swapped the cups."
Seraphina's world narrowed. Arabella's voice stayed gentle, almost affectionate. "I saved a lady," she said. "I saved our mother's chance at protection." Seraphina's hands went cold. "And then you let me be blamed?" Seraphina whispered. Arabella's eyes flashed sharp. "You were blamed because you were there," she hissed. "And I couldn't be, not if I wanted to survive, not if I wanted to marry well." Seraphina's throat burned. "You ruined me so you could rise," she said, voice shaking with truth. Arabella's smile softened into something almost pitying. "Don't be dramatic," she murmured. "I thought you'd vanish and become someone else. That's what women do." Seraphina stared at her sister, beautiful, ruthless, alive. And she realized the second twist. Arabella hadn't returned out of guilt. Arabella had returned because someone was close to exposing her, and Arabella needed a scapegoat again. Rafe watched Seraphina's face change. "What did she say?" he asked, low. Seraphina didn't answer him, because the ballroom's air shifted again, because Lady Ashcombe stood at the top of the stairs, pale and poised, and she raised her glass. "My friends," she said, voice carrying, "I have endured enough whispers." The room stilled. Lady Ashcombe looked straight at Arabella. "And I have seen enough women destroyed to keep men comfortable," she continued. Arabella's smile faltered. Lady Ashcombe lifted a letter. "A confession," she said softly, "delivered this morning." Arabella's eyes went wide, because she recognized her own handwriting. Lady Ashcombe's gaze did not waver. "It describes the night Julian Merrow died and the woman who ensured he did." Arabella's face went white. The ton held its breath. Seraphina's heart thundered. Rafe's hand found hers, steadying, not claiming. Lady Ashcombe turned her eyes to Seraphina then. "And it also explains," she said, voice gentler,
why Miss Seraphina Blythe was blamed. Seraphina's breath caught. London's gaze pinned her, and Seraphina realized the highest, most dangerous moment of all. This was the instant London would decide whether she was monster or martyr. Seraphina stepped forward, not because she wanted their mercy, because she was done with their story. She lifted her chin and spoke clearly. I did not kill Julian Merrow, but I have been punished as if I had. Whispers rippled. Seraphina continued, voice tightening with controlled fury. And now you will watch the truth, she said, because I am finished being silent for your comfort. Arabella's eyes flashed with panic. She lunged fast toward Seraphina, like a woman who knew the only way to survive was to destroy first. Rafe moved instinctively, but Seraphina moved faster. She stepped aside, let Arabella's momentum carry her, and in one swift motion, elegant, brutal, she ripped Arabella's jeweled bracelet free. It snapped, scattering diamonds across the ballroom floor like shattered stars. Gasps erupted. Arabella froze, humiliated, trembling with rage. Seraphina held up the bracelet. Inside, threaded through the clasp, was a tiny folded scrap of paper, the original blood-stained fragment, the one Seraphina had taken 5 years ago. Her mother's handwriting. Arabella's face drained of color, because Seraphina finally understood. Arabella hadn't returned to keep Seraphina quiet. She'd returned to retrieve the evidence. Seraphina's voice was soft. You've been carrying this all along, she murmured. Arabella's mouth opened. No sound came. Lady Ashcombe's voice cut through the ballroom like steel. Guards. Arabella's knees went weak. London, hungry London, watched her fall. That night, after Arabella was taken away in disgrace, Seraphina stood in the music room again, shaking, not from fear, from the sheer violence of being seen. Rafe entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her like she was something fragile he wasn't allowed to touch without permission. Seraphina's laugh cracked. You wanted truth, she whispered. There it is. Rafe's voice was rough. I wanted you free, he said. Seraphina turned toward him, eyes bright. And what am I now? She asked. Rafe took one slow step closer. A woman London can't control, and the woman He stopped, swallowed, as if even saying it would be a kind of theft. Seraphina's throat tightened. Say it, she whispered. Rafe's eyes burned. I want you, he said, not as penance, not as a plan, as truth. Seraphina's breath trembled. And what if I can't forgive you? She whispered. Rafe nodded once. Then I'll still earn you, he said, because you should never have been forced to survive alone. Seraphina stared at him, a man who could have taken, choosing to wait. It undid something in her she hadn't realized was still holding. She crossed the space between them and pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and real. This isn't love yet, she whispered. Rafe's voice dropped. No, he said, it's the beginning. Seraphina rose on her toes and kissed him, once, careful, fierce. A kiss that wasn't surrender, a kiss that was choice. When she pulled back, her voice shook. If you ever make me small, she murmured, I will leave. Rafe's mouth twitched. soft, broken devotion. "Good," he said. "Then I'll spend my life making you bigger." In the weeks that followed, the Ton tried to rewrite the scandal in its favor. It always did. They pretended they had always suspected Arabella. They pretended they had always pitied Seraphina. They pretended they were shocked by poison in a polite house. But Seraphina didn't care anymore, because she was no longer asking London for permission to be whole. She had her name back, she had her mother safe, and she had Rafe, dangerous, controlled Rafe, learning day by day how to love without owning. On the first day Seraphina walked into a ballroom without flinching, a lady hissed behind her fan, "Murderess." Seraphina turned calmly. "Almost," she said, "but I learned restraint." The woman went pale. Rafe's hand found Seraphina's at her side, light, respectful. "Shall we dance?" he asked, not claiming, only asking. Seraphina's mouth curved. "Try to keep up," she murmured. And as they stepped into the waltz, London watched, furious and fascinated, because the most scandalous thing a woman can do is not to be desired, it is to be unafraid. Loveliest listener of the Ton, sometimes the story isn't about being rescued. Sometimes it's about learning you were never meant to be anyone's sacrifice.